Good morning and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhaso, and this morning we'll be looking at another discourse of the Buddha. This is a relatively well-known discourse called Sarakani, the Sakyan. So we'll start with paying homage to the Buddha, and then I'll read through the sutta and give some explanations, and then I'll take any questions at the end. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So this is from the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 55, sutta number 24, Sarakani Sutta. So actually the first sutta on Sarakani. So the discourse begins, and I'll be reading here from Bhante Suddhaso's translation, but making some alterations as I go along based on the Pali text. So the sutta begins at Kapilavatthu. Now at that time, Sarakani the Sakyan had passed away. The Buddha declared that he was a stream enterer, not liable to be reborn in the underworld, and bound for awakening. So in Pali that's sotapanno, so he was sotapanna, stream enterer, the first stage of awakening, which is said to be avenipata dhammo. So avenipata literally means downfall. And it's a term that's used to refer to the lower realms, the realms of rebirth below the human realm, which are significantly less comfortable and less pleasant than human life. So immediately below the human realm is the animal realm, and below that there's the realm of ghosts, and then below that there's the various hell realms, the various realms of extreme suffering. So all of that's included in the term vinipata, so downfall, so going in a downward direction from the human realm. So a stream enterer, one of their characteristics is that with the first stage of awakening, one is no longer subject to rebirth in the lower realms. If one is still being reborn, then one will be reborn only as a human or as a deva. But never as something lower than the human realm. So sotapanno avenipata dhammo, so a stream enterer, not subject to downfall, not subject to the lower realms. Niyato sambodhi parayano, so this means that one is certain to arrive at full awakening. So this is the critically important characteristic of a stream enterer, is that a stream enterer is someone who has developed sufficient understanding, who has made sufficient progress in the path, such that they will inevitably move towards full awakening. They will inevitably eventually attain full awakening. It might take several more lifetimes, but that is inevitably where they will wind up. So it's often said in Buddhist circles that you don't actually need to focus on becoming fully enlightened, you just need to focus on becoming a stream enterer. Because once you reach that step, then you'll naturally take the subsequent steps on your own. So the Buddha declared that Sarakani the Sakyan was a stream enterer, and the sutta continues. At that, several Sakyans came together, complaining, grumbling, and objecting, saying, "Oh, how incredible, how amazing! Who won't be a stream enterer? For the Buddha has declared even Sarakani to be a stream enterer after he passed away." But they say, Sarakani had a weakness in the training. He drank alcohol. So when the Buddha declared that Sarakani was a stream enterer, this caused a bit of a kerfluffle. So it was a bit controversial because, as we're saying here, people were saying, well, Sarakani wasn't actually that great of a Buddhist. He drank alcohol. Now, what this sutta doesn't tell us is it doesn't tell us how recent this was. So was Sarakani a complete alcoholic his entire life? Was he constantly drinking all day, every day for his whole life? Or was he an occasional drinker? Or was he someone who maybe used to drink but stopped a while back? Like, we don't have this kind of information. So it's important not to draw too strong a conclusion from this statement, because there's not actually that much information about Sarakani. So some people use this sutta as an excuse to drink alcohol, but that's completely missing the point. So this sutta is not meant to justify the consumption of alcohol, but it has a different point. As we continue going through the sutta, it will become clear. So long story short, the other lay people were not very impressed. They apparently didn't think Sarakani was a remarkable enough practitioner to be a stream enterer. So they're lamenting. So the sutta continues. Then Mahanama the Sakyan, so Mahanama was one of the Buddha's chief lay disciples, one of the lay disciples who was said to have attained the second stage of awakening. So there's a few other suttas with Mahanama the Sakyan which are quite interesting. So Mahanama the Sakyan went up to the Buddha, bowed, sat to one side, and told him what had happened. And the Buddha replies, Mahanama, when a lay follower has for a long time gone for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, how could they go to the underworld? In other words, how could they be reborn in a lower realm? And he says, and if anyone should rightly be said to have for a long time gone for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, it's Sarakani the Sakyan. Sarakani the Sakyan has for a long time gone for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. How could he go to the underworld? So, again, this is something which needs a bit of explanation, because here, when the Buddha says someone who's gone for refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, he doesn't just mean that you've recited Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. Like, that's not sufficient. So just reciting the traditional verses of going for refuge is not actually going for refuge. Those are just words. So going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha indicates a deep commitment in the heart. It indicates an establishment of a system of values. So going for refuge to the Buddha, well, first off, that means understanding what a Buddha is. It means understanding what an awakened being is, understanding why an awakened being is so respectable, understanding the qualities of perfect wisdom and compassion that a Buddha has, understanding the perfect liberation from defilement that the mind of a Buddha has, and having deep respect and appreciation for awakened beings and for the qualities that they've developed. So these are all aspects of going for refuge to the Buddha. Again, it's something much more profound than just repeating a few phrases. Similarly, taking refuge in the Dhamma. So it's understanding that the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, are a representation, a perfect explanation of how to attain awakening. And taking refuge in the Dhamma also means that one is valuing and appreciating the Dhamma, and one has a sincere commitment to learning and understanding the Dhamma, and a sincere commitment to applying and practicing the Dhamma. So taking refuge in Dhamma, again, it means that we have a sincere wish to learn what the Buddha taught, a sincere wish to study the suttas, a sincere wish to cultivate an experiential understanding of the contents of the suttas, and a wish to live in accordance with the suttas. So again, taking refuge in Dhamma, it indicates a direction in one's life. It's not like, oh, I take refuge in Dhamma and now I'm going to go deer hunting. It's like, well, no, it doesn't work that way. Taking refuge in Dhamma means that we're really trying to learn the Dhamma and to live in accordance with its principles. And taking refuge in Sangha. So Sangha, in the suttas, it normally has one of two meanings. So Sangha in the more ordinary sense means the monastic community, the community of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, male and female monks. So taking refuge in Sangha means that one has an understanding of the value of monasticism as being a core element of Buddhism. One has an appreciation for the qualities of renunciation and commitment, which are embodied by monasticism. One understands the value of being in the presence of Buddhist monastics, of supporting Buddhist monastics, of learning the Dhamma from Buddhist monastics, of practicing the Dhamma together with Buddhist monastics. So taking refuge in Sangha, again, it's more than just repeating a few words. It's actually about orienting your life. So either orienting your life around the Sangha in the sense of joining the Sangha, if one is interested in becoming a monk, then committing oneself to living a good monastic life, a life committed to the training. Or if one is a layperson, it means having a deep appreciation for the existence of Buddhist monks and for integrating that into your life. So taking time to go to monasteries, taking time to learn the Dhamma from monks, to discuss the Dhamma with monks, taking time to practice the Dhamma together with monks. So making a real sincere commitment to integrate the monastic Sangha into your life. And the other way the word Sangha is commonly used in the suttas is to mean the community of awakened beings, people who have attained the first stage of awakening or all the way up to full arhatship, so full awakening. So this is sometimes called the ideal Sangha or the noble Sangha. So this refers to anyone who's attained some stage of awakening. So taking refuge in Sangha is also acknowledging the fact that awakening is possible. If one lives a sufficiently noble life, a sufficiently dedicated spiritual life, then awakening is possible. And it's also acknowledging the importance and value of being around people who are well progressed on the path. So if you have the good fortune to know some awakened beings, then it's good to spend time with them. If you don't know any awakened beings, well then you still look for people who are very well advanced on the path, people who have cultivated admirable spiritual qualities. And you want to spend time around people like that, because then that encourages you to cultivate those same admirable spiritual qualities within yourself. So again, taking refuge in Sangha is a lot more than just saying Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. Taking refuge in Sangha means that you recognize the deep importance and value of Sangha. And you're trying to orient your life around the Sangha. So centralizing Sangha as a critical part of your life. Something which you hold more important and more valuable than any other group of people. So again, going for refuge to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha is something much more significant and profound than just reciting a few Pali verses at a ceremony once in a while. It's about completely orienting and structuring your life around Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. It's about orienting your priorities and value systems around Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. It's about structuring all of your activities of body, speech, and mind around Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And when somebody has that kind of sincerity and commitment in taking refuge, then the mind will naturally incline towards awakening. It's creating the conditions for the mind to progress towards awakening. So this is why the Buddha says when someone has for a long time gone for refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, that it's not possible for them to be reborn in the lower realms. He's talking about how when one has this really sincere commitment, valuing and respect and commitment to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, then it's natural that one will cultivate the necessary attributes of stream entry, the necessary attributes for the first stage of awakening. And so then the Buddha reiterates, he says, Sarakani the Sakyan has for a long time gone for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. How could he go to the underworld? Again, people might have criticized, saying that Sarakani the Sakyan from the outside, he didn't look like he always had absolutely perfect behavior. But the Buddha is saying, well, the thing was that he had an absolute commitment to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. He had a deep faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. He had very high respect for Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. He was really committed to trying to embody the principles of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And so for those reasons, Sarakani the Sakyan was able to cultivate a good spiritual practice that culminated in the first stage of awakening. So then the Buddha carries on, and here the Buddha gives a brief explanation of the 4 stages of awakening. So the first one, he says, take a person who has experiential confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, so it's not just the Buddha. So they have unshakable confidence in the Buddha, that the Buddha is fully awakened being with perfect morality, perfect conduct, perfect wisdom, and so on. So it's given using the standard phrase, Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho, etc., the standard list of the qualities of the Buddha. And perfect faith in the Dhamma, so faith that the Dhamma is svakato, ekaliko, ehipasiko, etc., so that the Dhamma is well expounded, it's apparent, it's something which we can experience for ourselves, and which leads us towards awakening, and has perfect faith in the Sangha. So perfect faith in the Sangha as the ideal community of the Buddha's disciples. So someone who has this perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and furthermore, the Buddha says they have joyful wisdom, that's hasapanya. Hasa means joyful. So hasapanya, joyful wisdom, and javanapanya. Javanapanya means swift wisdom. Actually, this is kind of amusing. The word javana literally means running, but its metaphorical meaning is swift. So joyful wisdom, swift wisdom, and are endowed with liberation. So their mind is completely liberated from defilements. So joyful wisdom, swift wisdom, and a liberated mind. And the Buddha says this kind of person has reached the undefiled liberation of heart, liberation by wisdom in this very life. So they're completely liberated from the asavas, the corruptions of mind, the defilements of mind. And the Buddha continues, he says, and they live having realized it with their own insight due to the ending of defilements. And so he's speaking here about an arhat, a fully awakened being, as someone who has perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, has joyful wisdom, swift wisdom, liberation from the defilements, and has realized the complete liberation of heart and mind through the elimination of their defilements. And the Buddha says, this person is exempt from hell, the animal realm, and the ghost realm. They're exempt from places of loss, from bad destinations, from the underworld. So a fully awakened being, of course, is not going to be reborn in any of the lower realms. They're actually exempt from the cycle of rebirth entirely. Then the second case, the second one which the Buddha speaks about, he says, take another person who has perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. They have joyful wisdom and swift wisdom, but are not endowed with liberation. So this is someone who has not completely purified the mind. So now he's talking about the non-returner. So the non-returner is one step below full awakening. And a non-returner is characterized as being completely free of sensual desire and aversion, but they still have a subtle sense of conceit, a subtle sense of self-centeredness, a subtle sense of self-identity. So their mind is not yet completely pure. It's not yet completely purified, because there's still a subtle sense of I am, a subtle attachment to self-existence. But because their mind is very pure, because they've removed all desire and aversion, then they're very close to awakening. And they're not capable of being reborn in even in the human world, or the lower Deva realms. So a non-returner can only be reborn in the Pure Lands. So the Buddha says, referring to the non-returner, he says, with the ending of the 5 lower fetters, they are reborn spontaneously, and they attain awakening there, and are not liable to return from that world. So again, this is saying that the non-returner is only born in the Pure Lands, in these particular heaven realms, which are occupied only by non-returners and arhants, so particularly nice place to be. And continue practicing there until they eventually attain full awakening. And so the Buddha says this person too is exempt from hell, the animal realm, and the ghost realm, places of loss, bad destinations, and the underworld. So naturally, non-returners, they can't even be reborn as humans, let alone anything below that. Then the next case, talking about the once returner, the Buddha says, take another person who has perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. They do not have joyful wisdom or swift wisdom, nor do they have liberation. So this is someone who still has a certain amount of defilements left in the mind. They still have a certain amount of desire and aversion. They've made a fair amount of progress on the path, but their mind still has some lingering traces of desire and aversion, as well, of course, as attachment to self-identity. So speaking about the once returner, the Buddha says, with the ending of 3 fetters, so the non-returner has eliminated 5 fetters, so the last 2 being desire and aversion. The once returner has eliminated only the first 3. So the first 3 are vicikicca, which is doubt in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So because they have perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, then they no longer have doubt. Sakaya Ditti, they've eliminated identification with body and mind. So they no longer think the body is me and mine. They no longer think mental objects are me and mine. And they've eliminated silabhata paramasa, which means a misunderstanding of spiritual practices, or a misunderstanding of habitual practices. So they might still engage in some spiritual practices, some religious observances, but they do so with the understanding that it's the purification of heart that leads to awakening, not necessarily specific rituals or ceremonies or practices. So with the ending of these 3 fetters and the weakening of greed, hatred, and delusion, this person is a once returner. They come back to this world once only, then make an end of suffering. So the once returner is somebody who has made a lot of progress on the path. They're not yet fully awakened. They're not yet a non-returner, but their mind is sufficiently pure that if they are reborn as a human, it will only be once more. So they're very close to awakening. So once returner is actually a quite advanced state of practice, and it's not common. So none of these stages of awakening are common, but the higher one gets, the more rare it becomes. So even once returners are quite rare. And the Buddha says regarding the once returner, this person too is exempt from hell, the animal realm, and the ghost realm, places of loss, bad destinations, and the underworld. And then finally he comes to the stream enterer. So he says, take another person who has perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, but they do not have joyful wisdom or swift wisdom, or freedom, or liberation. So they still have defilements in the mind, and their wisdom has not been developed enough yet to start to pierce through the basis of the defilements. But he says, with the ending of 3 fetters, they're a stream enterer, not liable to be reborn in the underworld, and bound for awakening. And he says, this person too is exempt from hell, the animal realm, and the ghost realm, exempt from places of loss, bad destinations, in the underworld. So this is the stream enterer, the first stage of awakening. So again, they've They've removed the first three fetters, so attachment to or identification with body and mind, doubt in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and misunderstanding of spiritual practices. So they've removed those three fetters. And with that basis of perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, then this means that they're moving towards full awakening, bound to eventually attain full awakening. Then the Buddha carries on. He gives two more kinds of people. So people who are not yet stream enterers, but who are close to stream entry. So these are two kinds of people which are mentioned in a few suttas. Usually they're called the faith follower and the wisdom follower. So the first one the Buddha describes is the wisdom follower. He says, take another person who does not have perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. They do not have joyful wisdom or swift wisdom or liberation. Still, they have these qualities: the faculties of faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And they accept the teachings proclaimed by the Buddha after contemplating them with wisdom. So this is called the wisdom follower or the Dhamma follower. So when it says they don't have perfect faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, what this means is that they're not yet a stream enterer. So they haven't yet had a deep experiential understanding of the Dhamma. So there can still be some lingering doubt or uncertainty in the mind because one has not yet seen with one's own eyes the truth of the Dhamma, the reality of the Dhamma. But the person, as it says here, they have developed faith, so they have some degree of faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, enough to take the practice seriously and to practice with some dedication. They have the quality of energy, of virya, this quality of heroic effort. So they're putting forward a sincere effort in practicing the Dhamma. They've cultivated mindfulness and concentration, so sati and samadhi. So sati and samadhi is allowing one to start to clearly examine one's own mind, which is the necessary basis for realizing the truth of the Dhamma. And they're cultivating wisdom, which means, again, learning the Buddhist teachings and learning how to observe the reality of the Buddhist teachings in our own experience. And he says this person accepts the Dhamma taught by the Buddha after contemplating them with wisdom. So this is somebody whose basis of practice is learning the Dhamma, studying the Dhamma, contemplating the Dhamma, and based upon that intellectual understanding of Dhamma, then they commit to practicing. So cultivating the five spiritual powers as mentioned here. So faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And the Buddha says this person too does not go to hell, the animal realm, and the ghost realm. They don't go to places of loss, bad places, or the underworld. So this is interesting because this is someone who's not yet a stream enterer. And yet the Buddha is saying that this is someone who has cultivated sufficient understanding of Dhamma, sufficient wisdom based upon that understanding of Dhamma, that they will eventually become a stream enterer. This is clearly stated in other suttas, that the faith follower and the wisdom follower are people who will become stream enterers. They're not there yet, but they're practicing with sufficient dedication and clarity that they will eventually reach the first stage of awakening. Which then means that they won't be reborn in the lower realms. Once they become stream enterers, that will become guaranteed, will become certain. And then he speaks about the faith follower. So he says, take another person who does not have perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, does not have joyful wisdom, swift wisdom, or liberation. Still, they have these qualities. The faculties of faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And they have a degree of faith and love for the Buddha. So in contrast to the wisdom follower, the faith follower maybe is someone who doesn't have such commitment to studying and contemplating the Dhamma, but they have a genuine sense of faith in the Buddha. So it's not yet perfect faith because their practice is not developed enough for perfect faith, but they have strong confidence in the awakening of the Buddha. They have strong confidence in the Dhamma, and based upon that confidence, they practice with sincerity. And so the Buddha says that kind of person also, based upon that faithful dedication to practice, that person also will become a stream enterer. So for the faith follower also, he says, this person does not go to the lower realms. And then the Buddha ends with this amusing remark. He says, if these great sal trees could understand what was well said and poorly said, I would also declare them to be stream enterers. So the Buddha here is making a bit of a joke, actually, because in Buddhism, plants are not considered sentient beings, trees are not considered sentient beings. So the Buddha is saying, well, even if these trees here could understand good speech and bad speech, then they could become stream enterers. So his point is, he's saying, Sarakani, maybe his conduct wasn't always completely perfect, but he had developed a lot of admirable qualities, and his faith was incredibly strong, incredibly sharp, incredibly profound. Basically the Buddha here is saying that anyone who cultivates the necessary qualities of mind can attain awakening, even if they've made some mistakes in the past. So the Buddha continues, he says, why can this not also apply to Sarakani? And he says, Sarakani the Sakyan undertook the training at the time of his death. So again, the point here is that as Sarakani was coming close to the end of his life, then his commitment to Dhamma became stronger. His commitment to the training became stronger. So maybe he made some mistakes earlier in his life, but that didn't stop him from committing fully to Dhamma practice as he approached the time of his death. So that's the end of this discourse. So we can go ahead and respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, and then I'll see if there's any questions to answer. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And hello to the people joining in online. Hello to David, Richard, Rebecca, John, Maria, Manal, Mike, Maria, Karuna, and Jayanta. Welcome all of you. And I see a couple questions. So Mike says, regarding the experiential confidence in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, is stream entry required to gain that experiential confidence, or is that experiential confidence required for stream entry? I would rather say that the two happen simultaneously. So the perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha is said to come from when one clearly sees for oneself the reality of anatta, of non-self. So when one clearly, directly observes this body is not me, this mind is not me. In other words, this is breaking through Sakya Ditti. When one clearly sees this body is not me, this mind is not me, then one realizes, oh, the Buddha was right. So this is the central, core, unique teaching of Buddhism, is the teaching of non-self. So when one clearly sees this body and mind, which I always thought was me, I now clearly see as not me. Then that's a direct confirmation of Buddha Dhamma, which then is perfect faith in Buddha Dhamma. Because this is the core, critical, central teaching of Buddhism, which absolutely everything else in Buddhism revolves around. So when one clearly sees the truth of it for oneself, then that is perfect faith in the Dhamma. So as I understand it, this perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha and stream entry, these happen simultaneously. They're inseparable. And Mike says, to clarify, I've experienced a reduction in my own suffering since I've begun to follow the path, which has given me confidence. And he clarifies further, I'm not a stream enterer, so I'm wondering if my idea of experiential confidence is wrong. I'm not a stream enterer, wouldn't expect to become one from so little. Yeah, so of course, the more we practice, the more confidence we have in the validity of the Dhamma. And that's good. That's actually really good. It's really helpful. So it's important to understand that when the Buddha is talking about perfect faith, this unshakable faith, he's talking about something much deeper than just like, oh, I practiced a little bit and got a little bit happier. Or I've been practicing for a while and my mind is a bit sharper and calmer than it used to be. The Buddha is talking about something much deeper than that. He's talking about a direct personal confirmation of anatta, of non-self. And that's what leads to this irremovable confidence in Buddha Dhamma, this irremovable faith in Buddha Dhamma. So Manal says, would you please describe further what is meant by joyful wisdom and swift wisdom? So again, that's Hasapanya and Javanapanya. These words are actually not defined in the suttas that I'm aware of. So I could search for it, but I don't remember coming across a sutta where these terms are defined in detail. Joyful wisdom, well, first I would take that as pointing out the quality of joyfulness as being an aspect of Buddhist practice. That when we're practicing Buddhism, we're cultivating an ever-deepening joy, an ever-deepening happiness. So Buddhism is not some painful, horrible slog through a nightmare with the hope that eventually there might be some light at the end of the tunnel. But actually Buddhist practice is an ever-increasing happiness and joy. And it's a happiness and joy which comes through wisdom. So as we start to develop wisdom and to see our experiences with more clarity and precision, then that also means that we're recognizing the causes of our suffering with more clarity and precision, which means we're able to transcend the causes of our suffering, which then means that we're cultivating a sense of joyfulness, a sense of happiness and serenity. And swift wisdom means that one quickly and immediately recognizes the truth of things. One quickly and immediately recognizes the impermanent and impersonal quality of every experience. So the experience of normal people is to be muddled and confused when faced with some new experience. And even as one begins to practice Buddhism, there's still a tendency to initially be confused. And then we remember the Dhamma and we start applying the Dhamma to our experience and things start to get a bit clearer. But there's still that initial muddiness in the mind. Someone with swift wisdom, they go immediately to Dhamma. When having any experience, they immediately see it in terms of Dhamma, through the lens of Dhamma. So there's no delay in the application of wisdom. So this would be my understanding of these two terms. Later on I'll do some digging around and see if I can find a more detailed explanation anywhere, but I don't remember seeing one in the suttas. And Karuna asks, why is mana eliminated so much later than Sakaya Ditti? So again, Sakaya Ditti is the more coarse layer of self-identity. It's sometimes called specific self-identity. So I am this body, I am these thoughts, I am these emotions, I am these opinions. Whereas mana, so mana, by the way, literally means concept. Mana is normally translated as conceit, but the actual meaning of the word mana is concept. So mana is the concept of self-existence. So asmi mana, the concept I am. Asmi means I am or I exist. So asmi mana is the root concept of self-existence, the root concept of individuality, the root concept of I am, I exist. So Sakaya Ditti is specific self-identity. I am this, I am that, I am these things. Whereas asmi mana is the root foundational generalized belief in self-existence. So just I am. So the stream enterer has recognized I am not these specific things. But there is still that deeper sense of self-existence. There's still that sense of, well, I may not be these specific things, but I still exist. I still am. There is still me as an independent individual entity, as a unique, separate being. So that belief still exists in the mind, and that's asmimana. So it's non-specific self-identity, as opposed to Sakaya Ditti, which is specific identity, specific self-identity. And Nyayanara says, what about those who never encounter the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha and therefore cannot have faith in them? Can they get enlightened in the Buddhist sense? Yes. So such a person is called Pacceka Buddha. They're quite rare. But it does sometimes happen that somebody has developed very strong wisdom in past lives, and therefore, even without having access to Buddhist teachings, they're able to spontaneously attain awakening on their own because of their own depth of wisdom and their own practice. So Pacceka means solitary or individual. And they're called that because they attain awakening without a teacher. And also, Pacceka Buddhas, generally speaking, are not able to teach other people how to attain awakening. So their experience is something personal and intuitive and spontaneous. Therefore, it's very difficult for them to explain to other people how to practice for the same realization. So they're also called solitary for that reason, because they're not able to have students and disciples who can attain the same realization. That said, if anybody attains awakening these days, we would not call them a Pacceka Buddha, because we would say that anyone in the world these days is influenced to some degree by the Buddha's teachings. So keeping in mind that Buddhism had some influence worldwide, even as long as 2,000 years ago. So there's fragments of Buddhism made it to Europe all the way back in around the time of Jesus, so 2,000 years ago. There were some fragmentary records of Buddhism in Europe during the time of the Roman Empire. And of course, the ancient Greeks made it all the way to India and had interactions with Buddhists in India. And that was around the year 100 BC. So 2100 years ago. So the Buddhist teachings have disseminated in some form worldwide and have been for quite some time. So we wouldn't call anybody who attained awakening these days, we wouldn't call them a Pacceka Buddha. We would say that they've still been influenced by Buddha Dhamma in some way. But yeah, it is theoretically possible to attain awakening without access to Buddha's teachings. It's just much more difficult and much more rare. But it does sometimes happen. And that looks like the last question. So we can go ahead and conclude at this time with 3 more sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We'll see you all next time.